Nowadays, when people hear about Buddhism, many just think of mindfulness. In recent years, this idea has become a global trend. Therapists, life coaches, and even big corporations have embraced it as a tool to help people manage stress and find a bit of balance in the rush of modern life. But how many of us ever stop to wonder, is mindfulness really all that the Buddha taught? Is focusing on the breath, simply staying aware in the present moment, enough to reach the true freedom the Buddha pointed to? The truth is, early Buddhism goes much deeper. The Buddha didn't just stop at teaching people how to concentrate their minds. He opened up a whole revolution of awareness, not just to manage surface stress, but to see through the roots of suffering and ignorance. He offered a way for anyone to live with genuine freedom, unbound by the illusions our own minds keep spinning. The first thing the Buddha pointed out was the true nature of suffering. Suffering is not just the pain we feel when we fail, lose something, or get hurt. It's the entire sense of unsatisfactoriness and restlessness running through our lives. No matter how wealthy or successful you become, you will still face impermanence, loss, aging, sickness, and death. By looking deeply into suffering, we began to see its true cause, our blind clinging to things that are constantly changing. This body, these feelings, these thoughts. The Buddha didn't stop at pointing out suffering. He showed us the path to go beyond it. By letting go of the illusions we hold so tightly, we believe there is a fixed self inside that controls everything. We think happiness comes from clinging to things. But this mistaken belief is exactly what ties us down in endless cycles of fear, worrying, hope, and disappointment. This is why mindfulness, while essential, is only the beginning. It's like the first door we open to start noticing the flow of our body and mind. But if we stop there, we're just watching clouds without ever seeing the vast sky behind them. The deeper wisdom of Buddhism invites us to go further, to see the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless nature of all things. When we see this clearly, the mind naturally lets go of clinging, and real freedom begins to bloom. Some people think that the idea of no self sounds abstract or irrelevant to modern life. But if you look closely, you'll see that all our conflicts and pain come from this sense of I. When someone insults you, who gets hurt? The I feels attacked. When you feel jealous, who's jealous? The I thinks is losing to someone else. When you're worrying about the future, who worries? It's this I that fears losing what it has or not getting what it wants. As you practice mindfulness more deeply, you start to see that this I is not a fixed thing. It's just a collection of memories, habits, thoughts, and reactions, all constantly shifting. Like a river, the water flows endlessly. No drop stays the same. When you really see this, you stop needing to protect this I so fiercely. You stop fearing threats to something that isn't solid to begin with. Then, naturally, the mind feels lighter. Freedom doesn't come from outside. It's the ability to see the truth inside. When illusions drop away, you live with openness and ease. Your words and actions come from a place less driven by anger, fear, or grasping. In this modern world, full of noise and change, the Dharma still holds timeless value. Mindfulness keeps you present in body and mind, but wisdom is what helps you break through the deepest misunderstandings. You can apply this anytime, anywhere. When you feel anger, pause, breathe, notice the anger. Don't suppress it or explode with it. Just look deeply. Who is angry? What eye is being hurt? Simply observing like this, you'll see the anger is like smoke. It rises, but it fades away once you stop fueling it. It's the same with desire. When craving shows up, notice it. Smile at it. Watch it pass. You stop being its slave. You start to master yourself, not by force, but by clear seeing. Your breath, your body, your feelings, your thoughts, all become gateways back to the present moment. And from that moment, you see the true nature of impermanence and selflessness. That's the moment when mindfulness turns into insight, the wisdom that frees you from the endless loops of suffering. I hope this video helps you see that Buddhism is not something distant or only for monks. It's a living path, a timeless map you can follow to see clearly and live freely right here and now. If you want to go deeper on this journey, start simply. Slow your breath, sit quietly, and watch your mind. Little by little, you'll discover that behind all the changing thoughts and feelings, there's always a vast open sky where no suffering can tie you down anymore. Thank you for watching. If you find these teachings helpful, please subscribe to the Dharma Journey to keep exploring the wisdom of Buddhism and meditation with me. Wishing you true freedom and deep peace wherever you are. Part 1: Mindfulness is just the gateway. When people first come across Buddhism, especially in the West, the first thing they usually hear about is mindfulness in Pali. This word is sati, the quality of being fully awake and aware in the present moment. At first glance, it seems so simple. Feel your breath, notice your steps, bring your mind back when it wanders, and indeed, this practice alone can change your life, calming anxiety, easing stress, and helping us become more present in our busy modern world. But if we look deeper into the Buddha's original teachings, we see something vital. Mindfulness is only the entrance, not the whole path. It's the doorway that lets us begin to see clearly. But if we stop at the doorway, we never really enter the house. The early Buddhist texts make this very clear. The Buddha never taught mindfulness as an isolated practice. He always paired it with pan, wisdom. Mindfulness makes us aware of what's happening. Wisdom helps us understand the true nature of what we see. Without wisdom, mindfulness alone is like having a flashlight, but never pointing it at the roots of our problems. You see the surface, but miss what lies beneath. A common image in the suttas is that of a farmer watching over his field. Mindfulness is like standing guard, noticing weeds, pests, or anything harmful. But wisdom is knowing which plants to pull, which to water, and how to cultivate the soil for a good harvest. Without wisdom, you might see everything clearly, but never act in a way that truly frees you from suffering. This is why, in the Eightfold Path, mindfulness samasati is only one step. It sits alongside right view, right intention, right effort, and right concentration. All of them work together to guide us toward freedom. When people reduce Buddhism to just be mindful, they unknowingly cut away the deeper teachings that actually lead to liberation. Think about your daily life. You might be mindful of your breath. You feel it go in, go out. You're mindful of your steps. Left foot, right foot, the ground beneath you. This is good. But if you never ask deeper questions, who is breathing? Who is walking? What is this mind that's aware? Then mindfulness stays shallow. You remain in the front yard, never stepping into the garden where real insight grows. The Buddha taught that all things are impermanent, anicca, unsatisfactory, dukkha, and not self-anatta. These three marks of existence are not obvious at first glance. They reveal themselves through deep looking, through a mind that's both calm and sharp. Mindfulness studies the mind so it can see, but wisdom is what sees through. So when you sit and breathe, don't just notice the breath. Look into its nature. Notice how each inhale arises and passes away, how no two breaths are the same, how your body is constantly changing, your thoughts always shifting. Where is the fixed I in all of this? Who owns this breath, this body, this mind? This is the turning point. You begin to see that what you thought was solid is just a flow. The anger that comes up is not yours. It's just a passing condition. The fear that arises is not some permanent enemy. It's a visitor that comes and goes. Even the sense of me watching all this is not something solid. It, too, appears and disappears depending on causes and conditions. When you reach this level of seeing, mindfulness becomes much more than a stress relief technique. It turns into a tool that cuts through the deepest illusions of self and reality. It shows you the ever-shifting, selfless nature of all things, and this, the Buddha taught, is where real freedom begins. Sadly, in modern times, mindfulness has often been stripped of this depth. It's taught in offices, clinics, and schools as a secular skill. Just pay attention. Be here now. Focus on your breath to calm down. There's nothing wrong with this. In fact, it helps countless people. But if we only stay there, we miss the radical, liberating heart of the Buddha's message. He didn't come to teach people how to relax a little. He came to show us how to see through suffering at its very root. Mindfulness is the entryway, a stable platform. Wisdom is the lamp that lights the darkness of ignorance. Together, they transform our entire relationship with life. So when you practice mindfulness, remember, this is not the final destination. It's a beautiful first step, but not the whole journey. Let mindfulness open the door. Then walk through it with the courage to look deeper. Ask, what is this mind? What is this self? What clings? What suffers? With these questions, your practice shifts from simply knowing the breath to knowing the true nature of everything that arises and fades away. This is why the Buddha's path is called a path of seeing and knowing, not blind belief. It's about direct experience. When you see for yourself that everything changes, that nothing can be held on to, that there is no solid I behind it all, something in you softens. Clinging drops away. Fear begins to dissolve. A freedom you didn't know was possible starts to reveal itself, quietly, like a flower blooming at dawn. So be mindful, but don't stop there. Let mindfulness lead you into insight, and let insight lead you into the kind of freedom that can't be shaken by anything in this world. This is the true gift of the Buddha's teachings. Not just a calm mind, but an awakened heart. A heart that sees clearly, clings to nothing, and lives fully at peace. Part 2. Seeing the three marks clearly. One of the most radical and liberating insights the Buddha offered the world is known as the three marks of existence, or in Pali, the Tilakkhana. These three simple truths are so profound that seeing them directly can transform the way we relate to life, suffering, and ourselves. The three marks are: 1. Impermanence, anicca. Everything is constantly changing. Nothing lasts forever. to suffering or unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, clinging to what changes brings stress and dissatisfaction. 3. Not self anatta. There is no fixed, unchanging I behind our experience. At first glance, these truths might sound abstract or even unsettling, but when you sit with them, observe them directly in your own experience, they become a source of deep wisdom and freedom. They are not just concepts to believe. They are patterns to see here and now. Impermanence is the most obvious, yet it's the one we resist the most. Look at your own body. You were once a baby, then a child. Now you are an adult, and each day you change a little more. No breath is the same as the one before it. Thoughts arise and pass. Feelings appear and disappear. Relationships, possessions, health, status. Everything shifts. The world itself is in constant flux. Yet even though change is so clear, we cling to things as if they could stay the same. We hold tightly to our youth, our loved ones, our jobs, our identities. We want them to stay as they are because we think our happiness depends on it. But reality doesn't cooperate. Sooner or later, life asks us to let go. Sometimes gently, sometimes with great pain. To see impermanence is to soften our grasp. It doesn't mean we stop loving or caring. It means we love and care with the wisdom that everything is passing through. We appreciate more deeply because we know nothing is guaranteed to last forever. Impermanence gives life its preciousness. Dukkha, the second mark, is often translated as suffering, but it's more subtle than just pain. It points to the fact that nothing condition can completely satisfy us. Even our happiest moments carry a seed of unease because we know they won't last. The vacation ends, the party is over, the praise fades, the body ages. Why does this unsatisfactoriness exist? Because of our clinging. We grasp at what we like and push away what we don't. We want pleasure without pain, gain without loss, life without death. This endless struggle against reality keeps us restless and discontent. The Buddha didn't teach that life is only suffering, but he did show that our attachment to impermanent things guarantees we'll never find lasting peace that way. To see dukkha is not to become pessimistic. It's to understand where our deepest discontent really comes from. Not from life itself, but from wanting it to be something it can never be. Permanent, controllable, completely pleasing. When we understand this, we start to release our grip. We relate to pleasure and pain with more balance, knowing both are part of the same flow. Not self is the third mark, and perhaps the most revolutionary. It challenges our deepest assumption that there is a solid I inside, an owner of this body and mind. But when you look closely, where is it? Is it in the body? The body changes every moment, cells dying and renewing. Is it in thoughts? They come and go like clouds. Is it in feelings? They shift constantly too. What we call self is just a convenient label for a flow of changing processes. Form, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. These five aggregates khandhas interact and create the illusion of a me, but the Buddha invites us to look directly. Can we find anything permanent, independent, and in control? Seeing not self doesn't mean denying your existence or pretending you don't have a personality. It means understanding that what you think of as you is not a fixed thing to defend at all costs. It's a dynamic process, always in motion. When you see this, a tremendous weight lifts. You no longer have to protect something that was never solid to begin with. This insight doesn't come just from reading or thinking about it. It comes from mindful investigation. You watch a feeling arise, joy, anger, fear, and you see it pass. You observe a thought appear and fade. You notice how the sense of I changes depending on your mood, your memories, your surroundings. You see clearly that you are not a thing, but an unfolding. When you see all three marks directly, something profound happens. The mind naturally lets go. You don't have to force yourself to give things up. The seeing itself does the work. Clinging loses its power because you see there's nothing solid to cling to. The endless tension of holding on begins to relax. Freedom appears not as an idea, but as a lived experience. This is why mindfulness alone is not enough. Mindfulness steadies the mind, keeps it present. But it's this clear seeing, this insight into impermanence and satisfactoriness and not self, that actually untangles the roots of suffering. The three marks are not separate truths. They weave together perfectly. Because things are impermanent, they cannot fully satisfy. Because they cannot satisfy, clinging to them brings stress. And because there is no fixed self behind any of it, there's no one to truly possess or control these fleeting conditions. When this is seen deeply, the mind naturally rests. You don't need to renounce the world and hide in a cave. You simply stop expecting the world to give you what it cannot. You live more lightly, love more freely, let things come and go. You see the dance of life for what it is, a beautiful, shifting play of causes and conditions. This is the core of the Buddha's revolutionary teaching. It asks us not to take his word for it, but to look for ourselves, to see that freedom is not somewhere else. It's right here in the direct seeing that nothing stays, nothing satisfies completely, and nothing is truly me or mine. When this is known, a quiet joy arises, a peace that no changing condition can destroy. This is the wisdom that mindfulness was always meant to serve. Without it, mindfulness is just being present. With it, mindfulness becomes the gateway to awakening, a clear, fearless seeing that unties every knot we have tied around our own hearts. Part 3. The end of suffering is the ultimate goal. These days, many people come to Buddhism, meditation, or mindfulness for a very practical reason: to manage stress, to calm anxiety, to find a pocket of peace in a busy, noisy world. There's nothing wrong with that. In this modern life, when we're flooded by information, constant demands, and the weight of expectations, simply sitting quietly and watching the breath can truly be a priceless medicine for the mind. But if we stop at just stress relief or a temporary sense of calm, we miss the deepest heart of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha did not teach mindfulness so we could merely forget our suffering for a few moments. He pointed out that the nature of worldly existence, samsara, is suffering dukkha, and the ultimate goal of early Buddhism is not just to ease that suffering for a while, but to end it altogether. Nirvana, the complete cessation of suffering. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha gave us the Four Noble Truths, the core map for anyone who truly wants to understand suffering and go beyond it. 1. The truth of suffering dukkha, recognizing that suffering pervades life, not just obvious pains like sickness, old age, and death, but the subtle tension and dissatisfaction that follows us even in success, comfort, and pleasure. To the truth of the cause samudaya, understanding that suffering has a root cause, craving and clinging. This endless thirst makes us hold tightly to things we want and push away things we fear, believing this struggle will keep us safe or happy. 3. The truth of the end, nirvana. Seeing clearly that suffering can truly cease. When the root cause, craving, is uprooted, suffering loses its fuel and fades away. For the truth of the path, magga, the practical path that leads to the end of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path, it brings together right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, all working together to break the cycle of suffering at its root. Throughout all the Buddhist teachings, nirvana, the end of suffering, is never presented as some abstract, unreachable ideal. It is the direct aim, the natural outcome of seeing clearly and practicing rightly. Mindfulness is just one part of this path, a tool, not the destination. It is like a light that helps us see the movement of our thoughts and feelings, so we can recognize how greed, hatred, and ignorance arise and fade. But if we only watch, without using this awareness to cut through the roots of suffering, we remain stuck in the same old patterns today. Mindfulness is often packaged as a secular stress management technique. There are courses for office workers, executives, students, and busy parents. People learn to sit, breathe, scan their bodies, quiet their minds, but after the session, many step back into the same cycle of chasing, clinging, competing, comparing. The stress that quiets down today simply returns tomorrow because the root cause remains untouched. The Buddha emphasized that if you practice mindfulness without right view, without understanding reality as it truly is, then mindfulness stays shallow. It's like seeing a poisonous snake in your garden, but not knowing how dangerous it is or what to do about it. You see the snake, but you don't remove it. You stay tense, afraid, and at risk. Seeing alone does nothing if you do not understand what you're seeing. To end suffering, you must see its root. The greatest suffering is not in external circumstances. It lies in the mind's clinging to illusions. We cling to this body as if it could last forever. We cling to feelings, thoughts, possessions, relationships, all of which change moment by moment. We believe holding tight will make us secure and happy, but this very holding gives birth to fear, anxiety, jealousy, conflict, and endless disappointment. The Buddha didn't teach us just to find a calm moment on a cushion. He pointed us to look deeper, to see through ignorance itself, so that suffering no longer finds a place to grow. Ending suffering is not a distant goal reserved only for monks or saints. It is a living process here and now. Every time you clearly see anger arise and refuse to let it drag you around, you cut through suffering. Every time you notice a craving and gently let it go, you weaken the chains of clinging. Every time you face impermanence with understanding instead of fear, you taste a little freedom. These small insights add up, building a mind that grows lighter, clearer, and freer. Those who practice deeply come to understand that mindfulness and wisdom must always walk together. Mindfulness steadies the mind so it doesn't get swept away by old habits. Wisdom shines the light on the roots of suffering. Together they reveal the simple, liberating truth. When you see clearly, you naturally release your grip. There is no need to force yourself to renounce the world or flee from society. You just stop clinging to what can never truly satisfy. For someone who only wants a bit of comfort, mindfulness might seem enough. But for someone who truly wants to touch the essence of the Dharma, mindfulness alone is never the goal. It must lead to insight, and insight must aim for the end of suffering. Only when the roots of clinging are removed does true freedom appear, the freedom that doesn't depend on changing circumstances, but grows from within. When the mind stops grasping, the storms of life lose their power. Gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, they come and go like wind across a still lake. The lake remains clear and undisturbed. This is the very art of early Buddhism, not just to watch the breath, but to follow that breath back to the deepest layers of craving and illusion, and let them go, not just to manage stress for today, but to know for yourself the peace of a mind that no longer generates suffering. Nirvana, the end of suffering, is not a promise for another life, another realm, another person. It is the freedom waiting here and now. Whenever the mind is ready to see through its own illusions and rest in its natural peace. This is the true gift of the Buddhist teaching, not temporary relief, but lasting liberation, not escape, but clear seeing, not mere comfort, but a freedom no gain or loss can take away. Part 4. The Noble Eightfold Path, a complete map. When people hear about Buddhism, they often hear about meditation, mindfulness, or perhaps the idea of letting go. But what many people miss is that the Buddha didn't leave us with just a single practice. He gave us a complete and balanced map for liberation, known as the Noble Eightfold Path. This path is not a set of commandments or rigid rules, but rather 8 aspects of training that weave together to uproot suffering from its deepest roots. The Eightfold Path shows us that mindfulness alone is never enough. It is one crucial piece, but if practiced in isolation, without the support of right understanding, right effort, and right action, it easily becomes shallow or even misused. So what are these 8 aspects? 1. Right view samadhi. Right view is the foundation. It means seeing reality clearly, understanding the Four Noble Truths, recognizing the 3 marks of existence, impermanence and satisfactoriness, and not self. Right view is like wearing clear glasses. Without it, even the best intentions and practices are likely to miss the target. It reminds us why we practice, not just to calm the mind, but to uproot suffering at its core. To right intention samma sankappa. Right intention flows naturally from right view. Once we see how craving, ill will, and harmful thoughts create suffering, we cultivate intentions rooted in renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. This means choosing thoughts and attitudes that support freedom, not more clinging. The mind learns to incline toward compassion and letting go. 3. Right speech samavake. Right speech means using our words wisely. The Buddha emphasized truthfulness, kindness, and usefulness. We refrain from lying, harsh words, gossip, and idle chatter that stir up confusion or conflict. Our speech becomes a reflection of a mind that is mindful and compassionate. Each word can heal instead of harm. For right action samma kamanta. Right action is about ethical conduct, living in a way that does not harm ourselves or others. This includes refraining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. By acting ethically, we create a life that supports mental clarity and peace. It is hard for a mind weighed down by regret and guilt to find freedom. 5. Right livelihood samma jiva. Right livelihood extends ethical conduct into how we earn our living. The Buddha taught that we should not support ourselves by work that harms other beings or spreads suffering. He specifically discouraged livelihoods connected with weapons, human trafficking, dealing in intoxicants, or any trade that exploits others. When our work aligns with compassion, it becomes part of the path rather than a source of conflict. 6. Right effort samavayama. Right effort is the energy that sustains all the other factors. It means guarding the mind skillfully, preventing unwholesome states from arising, abandoning those that have arisen, cultivating wholesome states, and maintaining them. It is the steady, gentle, continuous effort to guide the mind toward freedom, not through force, but through wise, persistent care. 7. Right mindfulness samasati. Right mindfulness is the factor many people know today. It is the steady awareness of body, feelings, mind states, and mental objects. It grounds us in the present moment so we can see clearly. But on the Eightfold Path, mindfulness is not random awareness. It is guided by right view and right effort. It watches not just anything, but the very processes that give rise to suffering and freedom. 8. Right concentration samma samadhi. Right concentration is deep, steady, collected attention. In the Pali Canon, it is described as the development of the four jhanas, profound meditative absorptions that calm the mind and make it sharp like a surgeon's knife. Concentration provides the stability and depth for insight to cut through delusion. Without it, wisdom can remain shallow and easily scattered. When you look at these 8 factors together, you see that they cover every aspect of human life: understanding, thinking, speaking, acting, working, cultivating energy, being aware, and training the mind's depth. This is why the Eightfold Path is called a middle way. It avoids the extremes of self-indulgence and self-torture, weaving ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom into a single, integrated path. Many modern practitioners learn mindfulness alone and think it is enough. But mindfulness without right view can easily become mere attention training. You can be mindful of your breath, but if you do not understand the nature of clinging, you can still suffer. You can be mindful of your anger, but without right effort and right intention, you may only watch it grow stronger. You might even use mindfulness to sharpen harmful habits, like becoming more attentive and chasing desires or manipulating others. This is not what the Buddha intended. Right view keeps mindfulness on track. It reminds us this moment-to-moment awareness is not just for calm or comfort. It's for seeing clearly how suffering is born and how it can end. Right effort fuels this awareness with wholesome energy, and right concentration deepens it so wisdom can penetrate beneath the surface. The ethical aspects: right speech, right action, right livelihood, protect the mind from the kind of actions that create remorse, guilt, and new suffering. They make daily life part of the practice, not separate from it. Every word we speak, every choice we make, can support the path or pull us away from it. Sometimes people think the Eightfold Path is a list to be practiced step by step, in order, but in reality, it is more like 8 spokes on a wheel. Each one supports the others. Without right view, the wheel is blind. Without right effort, the wheel has no energy. Without right conduct, the wheel is unstable. Without right mindfulness and right concentration, wisdom never gets deep enough to transform the mind. The Buddha called this path noble because it leads us out of confusion and into a freedom that is noble, timeless, and not dependent on outward conditions. Each factor is simple to describe, but profound in practice. Together, they shape a life where suffering has less and less ground to take root. This is why, for those who wish to truly follow the Buddha's original path, seeing the Eightfold Path as a whole is essential. It reminds us that mindfulness is a tool, but wisdom is the compass. Ethics is the foundation, concentration is the depth, and effort is the fuel. Alone, any single piece is incomplete. Together, they form a path that is as relevant today as it was 500 years ago. A path walked step by step, moment by moment, toward the complete end of suffering. Part 5. Seeing Dependent Origination Clearly. Among all the profound teachings the Buddha offered, one of the most powerful, and perhaps most easily misunderstood, is the principle of dependent origination, or Paticcasamuppada in Pali. This teaching is not just a philosophical idea, but a direct way to look at life as it truly is, a web of causes and conditions, nothing standing alone, nothing existing independently. Dependent origination means that everything we experience, thoughts, feelings, actions, identities, arises because of other things. Nothing appears out of nowhere. Nothing stays by itself. Nothing can continue without support. The Buddha described this reality with a simple phrase: this being, that becomes. This not being, that does not become. In other words, when the conditions are there, things arise. When conditions fall apart, they cease. At first, this might sound abstract, but when you bring it into direct experience, it becomes a key that unlocks the deepest knots of suffering. Take anger, for example. When you feel anger, it doesn't just appear from nowhere. It arises because certain conditions come together. Maybe harsh words were spoken, or old wounds were triggered, or stress and exhaustion created a fertile ground for irritation to grow. If any piece of this chain were missing, the anger wouldn't appear the same way, or maybe not at all. This applies to everything. Joy arises because of conditions, pleasant contact, kind words, wholesome thoughts. Fear arises because of conditions, memories, expectations, past hurts. Even your sense of self arises from conditions, habits of thought, cultural beliefs, memories, bodily sensations, the endless loop of feelings and reactions. The Buddha once said that whoever sees dependent origination sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees dependent origination. It is that central. Why? Because once you see that everything is conditioned, you stop clinging to the illusion that there's a permanent I controlling all this. You begin to understand that what you call you is really a flow, dynamic, shifting, dependent. This insight changes everything. When you see deeply that you yourself are a process conditioned by countless factors, your upbringing, biology, karma, habits, you begin to soften the endless self-blame and shame. You realize it's not about excusing harmful actions, but about understanding them. Seeing conditions clearly empowers you to change them. Likewise, when you see that other people, too, are shaped by conditions, you naturally feel more compassion. That harsh boss, that difficult parent, that stubborn friend. All are moving through causes and conditions they often don't fully see or control. They suffer, just like you suffer, and their actions arise out of that suffering and ignorance. Seeing dependent origination, you stop looking for a single villain to blame, not even yourself. Instead, you start to see the chain of causes that creates every moment. You stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start asking, "What keeps feeding this? What conditions could I change?" This shifts the whole path from guilt and judgment to curiosity and freedom. When you understand that anger arises from certain conditions, you can work skillfully to weaken those conditions. Maybe you practice mindfulness to see anger the moment it arises, before it flares into words or actions. Maybe you cultivate patience and compassion as new conditions to replace old ones. When you see that your sense of a solid self is also conditioned, you hold it more lightly. You don't have to defend it all the time. You don't have to make everyone agree with your opinions. You don't have to exhaust yourself trying to protect an identity that is never really fixed to begin with. Dependent origination shows us there is no single thing that is you, just a pattern of cause and effect. There is no permanent core hidden behind the thoughts and feelings, only an unfolding process. When conditions change, the pattern changes too. This is why in the early Buddhist texts, the Buddha didn't just teach that everything is impermanent, anicca, and not self, anatta. He showed why it's not self, because it is dependently arisen. Whatever is conditioned cannot be truly owned or controlled. It comes and goes based on the conditions that feed it. This understanding naturally gives rise to letting go. You see that trying to force life to match your cravings is like trying to hold back the ocean with your hands. You see that clinging to ideas of me and mine only brings stress, because the conditions for those ideas are constantly shifting. When you really grasp dependent origination, you see that suffering, too, is conditioned. It is not random, nor is it a punishment. It follows laws of cause and effect. If you change the causes, you change the result. This is the genius of the Buddha's insight. Suffering is not fixed. It can end when its conditions are seen and let go. This is why dependent origination is the beating heart of early Buddhist wisdom. It is the map for how things come to be and how they cease to be. It shows us where our freedom lies, not in fighting the conditions of the world with brute force, but in wisely understanding them, so we stop feeding what hurts and nurture what frees. Seeing dependent origination is not about becoming passive. It is about becoming deeply responsible in a wise way. You stop fighting life blindly. Instead, you learn how to shape the flow by choosing your actions, your thoughts, your speech. You plant new seeds and stop watering the old weeds over time. This clear seeing breaks the cycle of blame and guilt for yourself and others. The mind softens, forgiveness arises naturally, because you see how blind craving and ignorance have conditioned so much of what we do. This doesn't mean there is no accountability, but it is a wise accountability, one that understands that true change happens by transforming the conditions, not by clinging to punishment and resentment. In this way, dependent origination is not just a theory. It is a living truth that unfolds in every breath, every thought, every moment of awareness. It invites us to look deeply at each link in the chain of our experience and ask, what feeds this? What happens if I stop feeding it? This is how the wheel of suffering slows down. not by force, but by wisdom that sees clearly. When the mind sees the chain, it knows where to break it. When the craving is not fed, suffering finds no ground to stand on. So this simple yet profound principle. When this exists, that comes to be. When this ceases, that ceases, becomes a guide for the entire path. It shows us that freedom is not somewhere far away. It is here, in the small but powerful choices we make every moment. To see clearly, to let go, and to trust the natural unfolding of a mind that understands its own true nature. Part 6. Insight Meditation. Going beyond calm. For many people, meditation means sitting quietly, calming the breath, letting the mind settle into a peaceful state. This calming practice, known as samatha meditation, is precious. It soothes restlessness, dissolves tension, and brings a sense of inner ease. But in the Buddha's original teaching, calm alone was never the final goal. Peaceful concentration is only a foundation. The real heart of the practice is vipassana, insight meditation, the clear seeing that cuts through delusion. The word vipassana means seeing things clearly, seeing through, or seeing in a special way. It is not about creating a special state or escaping ordinary life. It is about looking directly at reality, moment by moment, exactly as it is, without clinging, coloring, or running away. Calm samatha and insight vipassana work together like two wings of a bird. Calm steadies the mind so it doesn't scatter. Insight uses that steadiness to investigate deeply. Without calm, insight lacks focus and depth. Without insight, calm easily becomes attachment to pleasant feelings, a subtle trap that can keep us circling around a comfortable inner bubble without freeing us from suffering's roots. In early Buddhist practice, this deeper seeing begins with simple observation, watching the breath, the body, feelings, and thoughts. But it goes further. Instead of just noticing sensations come and go, insight meditation trains us to see three profound truths directly in our experience. The same truths the Buddha awakened to under the Bodhi tree: impermanence anicca, and satisfactoriness dukkha, and not self anatta. Imagine sitting quietly, following the breath. At first, the mind might calm down, thoughts slow, the body relaxes. This is samatha, but as mindfulness grows sharper, insight begins. You notice the breath is never the same. It changes with each inhale, each exhale. You see a thought arise, an old memory, a plan for tomorrow, and watch it vanish by itself. You feel an itch, watch the urge to scratch, watch it fade even if you don't move. This simple seeing reveals impermanence directly, not as an idea, but as a living fact. As you stay present, you begin to see unsatisfactoriness too. Even pleasant states pass away. Even calm has an edge, the subtle fear it might disappear. The mind grasps at good feelings and resists uncomfortable ones. This grasping is dukkha, the tension that keeps the mind restless, always wanting reality to be different. Then, if you look even closer, you see not self. Every sensation, thought, emotion comes and goes on its own. There is no single I controlling them all. Sometimes the body feels heavy, sometimes light. Sometimes the mind is peaceful, sometimes agitated. Each moment is built of causes and conditions. The self we usually defend is just a mental habit, a story stitched together from changing parts. Insight meditation turns this from philosophy into direct knowing. When you see the endless arising and passing, you stop clinging so tightly. You don't have to fight the world to make it match your desires. You see reality as a flow, a dance of birth and death in every moment. Clinging drops by itself because there's nothing solid to hold on to. This is why the Buddha emphasized insight so strongly. Deep concentration can feel blissful, but without clear seeing, it can become just another form of subtle craving, a retreat into pleasant states that vanish when you return to daily life. Insight uproots craving at its root because it shows you there is nothing permanent to crave and nothing fixed to protect. This doesn't mean insight meditation ignores calm. On the contrary, a calm mind is like clear water. You can see to the bottom, but the real work is seeing what's at the bottom, the impermanent, empty nature of all things, and in seeing this, the mind naturally lets go, not because it is forced, but because it knows there is nothing real to cling to. Insight meditation also goes beyond the cushion. It asks you to carry this clear seeing into daily life. When you feel anger, you notice its birth, the heat in the chest, the tightening jaw, the story in the mind, and you watch it pass. When pleasure arises, you enjoy it but see its fleeting nature. When fear comes, you investigate its causes. Every moment becomes a chance to observe reality directly, to loosen the knot of clinging a little more. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha described how this seeing cuts the cycle of ignorance. He taught that ignorance, not seeing reality clearly, is the first link in the chain of suffering. Because we don't see impermanence, we cling. Because we cling, we crave. Because we crave, we act in ways that keep the cycle spinning, generating karma, stress, and more becoming. Insight breaks this chain. When ignorance dissolves, the links that depend on it weaken. The mind becomes disenchanted, not in a cold or detached way, but in a wise, gentle way. What once seemed worth fighting for loses its grip. The thirst to grasp at things that can't last fades naturally. Many people think liberation must be dramatic or mystical. A bolt of lightning, a sudden explosion of bliss. But in early Buddhism, freedom is a gradual seeing through. It is like waking up slowly at dawn. At first, things are blurry. Then you notice the shapes, the patterns, the subtle play of light and shadow. Finally, you see clearly the trees, the path, the open sky. Insight meditation is this slow dawn. The more you practice, the more you trust your own clear seeing. You stop searching for escape routes and pleasant feelings alone. You stop waiting for life to be perfect. You see that every moment, when met with awareness and wisdom, holds the seeds of freedom. So while calm is beautiful, a priceless refuge in a world that rarely stops moving, insight is the key that opens the door. It shows you the truth that calm alone cannot touch, that every wave of thought and feeling is part of a vast, ever-changing ocean. And there is no solid self riding these waves. There is only seeing, knowing, and a gentle, fearless release into the reality of things just as they are. This is why in the Buddha's own words, Vipassana is the gateway to awakening, the deep, fearless investigation that cuts through ignorance and reveals the timeless freedom that was always here, hidden behind the illusions you cling to so tightly. Part 7. A revolutionary spirit. Inner freedom When people first hear about early Buddhist teachings, they often think it is a gentle philosophy, a set of ideas to ponder, perhaps a method for stress relief, or an ancient ethical code that sounds nice but feels distant from daily life. But this is not what the Buddha offered. The original Dharma is not just a philosophy to read. It is a radical, living revolution, a profound, fearless invitation to break free from the cycle of suffering, not in some distant future, but here and now within the mind itself, in a world driven by praise and blame, gain and loss, status and image. The Buddha's teaching points straight at the root of this endless chase. He showed that the deepest suffering does not come from the world outside, not from what people say or do, not from success or failure, but from the mind's constant clinging, grasping, and resistance. And he taught that true freedom means stepping completely outside this push and pull. This is why early Buddhism is so revolutionary. It asks each person to look directly at the cause of suffering inside themselves, to see clearly how much of life is spent chasing approval, fearing rejection, hoarding comfort, or avoiding pain. Then it shows a way to stop feeding these habits. It does not promise to change the world to fit our desires. Instead, it frees us from the belief that our well-being depends on making the world match our cravings. One simple example is praise and blame. All our lives, we are conditioned to crave praise, to feel validated, seen, appreciated. At the same time, we fear blame and criticism, which feel like attacks on the fragile story of me. We bend ourselves into shapes to be liked, to be right, to be admired. But the Buddha pointed out, praise and blame are just conditions. They come and go like the wind. If your happiness depends on praise, you will suffer every time blame appears. But if you see through both, you stand free, not because the world changed, but because your mind did. The same goes for gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute, the 8 worldly winds. The Buddha did not teach us to resist these winds with brute force. He taught us to see that they blow naturally through human life. They cannot be stopped. But the wise mind does not have to be blown around by them. It sees them, feels them, and stands rooted in understanding. This is inner freedom, uncheckable, unbothered by the shifting weather of the world. How does this freedom grow? It starts with simple mindfulness, noticing how these winds blow through your life. You feel the thrill of praise, you feel the sting of blame. You feel the pull of desire and the push of aversion, and instead of getting lost in them, you observe them. You see how they arise because of conditions, old habits, memories, hopes, fears. The mind that sees clearly does not cling so tightly. It lets the winds blow without being carried away. Over time, this clarity brings a simplicity to life. When you are not trying to defend an image, impress everyone, or get constant approval, you can live more honestly, you can speak more truthfully, you can listen more openly. Life becomes lighter, not because every problem vanishes, but because you stop piling more weight onto your own back. This is the spirit of the early teachings. Not just to manage stress for an hour on a meditation cushion, but to transform your entire relationship with life. This spirit is a revolution because it challenges the strongest illusion, that happiness must be hunted outside ourselves. The Buddha's way turns the search inward to the very mind that wants, fears, and clings. He taught that when the mind sees clearly, it naturally inclines towards simplicity. Greed loses its grip, ill will weakens, confusion dissolves. You don't have to fight these forces violently, you just stop feeding them. The mind learns to rest in what is simple, honest, and direct. This simplicity is not dull or lifeless. It is spacious, alive, and awake. The deepest promise of the Dharma is even more radical, that this inner revolution does not stop at a calm mind or a simple life. It goes all the way to the end of suffering, the complete ending of the cycle that keeps us bound to birth, aging, and death. This cycle, known as samsara, rolls on because of ignorance and craving. When these are seen clearly and released, the wheel stops turning. The Buddha called this stopping nirvana, not a place, not an escape, but the mind's full freedom from illusions and clinging. This is why early Buddhism cannot be reduced to mindfulness alone. Mindfulness is the doorway, but wisdom is what steps through it. Concentration is the ground, but insight is what grows there. Ethics is the foundation, but letting go is the flowering. The entire path works together to support a single purpose: freedom. People sometimes wonder if such freedom is possible in ordinary life. Surrounded by work, family, obligations, modern chaos, the early texts show that the Buddha's teaching was never meant only for monks in forests. Lay people, merchants, kings, and farmers came to him and asked, "How do we live wisely here and now?" And he always pointed them back to their own minds. He showed that freedom begins the moment you see things clearly and stop adding confusion to what is already here. In this way, the Buddha's revolution, silent yet powerful. It does not overthrow governments or conquer enemies. It overthrows the tyranny of craving and fear within your own heart. It conquers ignorance not with force, but with seeing. It breaks chains not with violence, but with understanding. This is not an overnight change. It unfolds moment by moment. Each breath observed mindfully, each thought seen as it is, each reaction held with wisdom. Slowly, the tangled knot of suffering loosens. Slowly, freedom stops being an idea and becomes your living reality. So the early Buddhist teaching is not a dusty relic for scholars or a spiritual hobby for people looking for temporary calm. It is a living path of fierce compassion for oneself and the world. It shows that you do not have to be tossed endlessly by praise and blame, by gain and loss. You can stand still, grounded in understanding. You can live simply, speak honestly, love wisely, and meet each moment with a mind that does not cling. And when you see this for yourself, you realize something profound. Everything begins with mindfulness, but it does not end there. Mindfulness opens the door. Wisdom walks through it. Compassion grows in its light, and freedom blossoms in the heart that has truly seen how things are. I hope this reflection has helped you see that mindfulness is not the final destination, but rather the doorway into the vast, liberating wisdom of early Buddhism. It's easy in our busy world to stop at the surface, to think that mindfulness means simply pausing for a breath, feeling the ground beneath your feet, or calming your racing mind for a few minutes a day. These practices are precious and needed, but they are only the beginning. The true spirit of the Buddha's teaching asks more of us and offers us so much more in return. It invites us to look deeper than the momentary calm, to see directly, into the nature of all things, that everything arises due to conditions, that nothing stays the same, that clinging to what cannot last is the heart of suffering, and that freedom comes when we see and release this clinging. This path is not about adopting a philosophy to admire from a distance. It is about living with eyes wide open. It is about having the courage to sit quietly and see the endless stories your mind spins. Stories of who you think you are, what you believe you need, what you fear you'll lose. It is about gently pulling back the curtain and realizing that behind every thought, feeling, and reaction lies the simple, liberating truth. Nothing here is truly mine or me. When you see this not just once, but again and again in your own heart, something shifts. You start to taste the freedom the Buddha spoke of, a freedom not granted by anyone else, not dependent on praise or blame, gain or loss. It is the freedom that appears when the mind understands how it builds its own cage and how it can stop. This is why the journey, sometimes called a quiet revolution, it does not demand you become someone else. It asks you to become deeply intimate with what you already are, to observe how the mind clings and fears, and then to see what happens when you do not feed that habit. It asks for courage because clear seeing is not always comfortable. Sometimes it shows us painful truths about how we cause our own suffering, but it also shows us the profound relief that comes when we no longer have to pretend, defend, or hold so tightly. If you've ever practiced mindfulness, even for a few breaths, you have already stepped onto this path. Maybe you've felt the small spark of calm when you watch your breath or listen deeply to your body. Maybe you've tasted that moment when a thought lost its power because you simply watched it come and go. These glimpses are precious. They show you what's possible. But if you feel called to go further, to understand how mindfulness connects with wisdom, ethics, and insight, then you're touching the heart of what the Buddha offered. This is where calm becomes clarity, where seeing becomes freedom, where simple awareness blossoms into true understanding of the causes and end of suffering. So I invite you to keep walking this path. Ask questions, sit quietly, watch your mind. Read the old words of the Dharma and test them in the laboratory of your own heart. Talk with others who care about these truths, and, most of all, trust that the same freedom the Buddha spoke of 2,500 years ago is still available, not only for monks and teachers, but for anyone willing to look deeply and live simply. If you found this video helpful, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the Dharma Journey. Together, we can keep exploring these precious teachings, not as distant ideals, but as living guides for how to see, act, and rest in a freedom that no praise or blame can touch. Have you ever tried practicing mindfulness in daily life? Are you curious to learn more about insight meditation, the deep seeing that goes beyond calm? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Feel free to share in the comments below. May your day be peaceful. May your mind be clear. May you walk gently on this path of understanding, step by step, breath by breath.